Going live and now officially live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the YouTube channel. Sunday afternoon almost as I do this, just approaching the noon hour here on a Sunday. Regular season is done. And with that said, I want to make a couple YouTube videos in the next few days here. And yeah, we'll get to looking ahead at this Sharks Las Vegas Round 1 series at a different time. I feel like that's necessary. But even more important than that is just looking back on the regular season that was for the Sharks. Again, before we dive into a playoff preview, I think we really need to digest where the Sharks have been. And that may be a fault of a lot of Sharks seasons because the anticipation is there that they'll always be in the playoffs, and they have been in 19 of the last 21 tries. Sometimes we don't do a well enough job of digesting what we just saw and trying to put that into context instead of just rushing into the playoffs, which, hey, I'm guilty of that as well, too, because for better or worse, this team is essentially only judged on their efforts and results in the second season. So first thing I want to mention here, and by the way, I'll be taking a peek at your questions and comments as we go here live on YouTube. I'm still getting used to this a little bit, the new format of live streaming on YouTube. But I'll try and check back in with comments here as I go. The regular season, 101 points, 46 wins. They could have actually ended the regular season with single-digit losses, but it got up to 11 in terms of regulation losses just because of that homestand, at the end of March where they got swept. And, you know, they had a really good season on home ice. I think it was just soured a bit by the end. So clearly dominant in their own barn. That's important. It was important, I think, to get back to that. Something the Sharks kind of got away from for several years, is that home ice, that true home ice advantage. But they have that back. And I think with the 101 points, I mean, that's as good or better as a lot of the recent years we've seen. But it's just how they arrived at 101 points. The journey, so to speak, of the last few weeks has really changed the perception of this team, where they're at. And that's understandable. I really think that we've seen indications of teams that are rolling right into the playoffs, and sometimes that continues. Other times we've seen struggling teams turn it around, like do a 180 as soon as everything goes to zeros again with the second season. But I do want to say the last two games here of the regular season and San Jose getting back to their defensive ways, you know that hashtag I love to pump out there, 2 or fewer. That's what they allowed in the last two games, last night against Colorado and then up in Edmonton the other night. So that ends with a nice taste in your mouth. Granted, I wish they had played the last 5, 6, 7 games like that, but that's not how it ended. And I'll get more into the injuries that they faced and at least the comebacks of Pavelski and Karlsson last night a little bit later on. So yeah, I mean, all in all, you have to look back at it two ways. Yes, we're a little bit jaded because of where they've been recently in losing a lot more than winning since basically mid-March, but also the overall body of work. And that's despite a handful of critical injuries. Vlasic was out for a significant time this year. Pavelski missed time. Obviously, Karlsson missed a bunch of time. Joe Thornton, before he really settled in, I would say November into December, he was still coming off the injury from almost a year prior. And I think we can clearly see, look at some of the passes he's made just in the last few games alone. Like, Joe Thornton is as back as you're going to see him. It's really been impressive to watch him get healthy and now watch him excel in this new role, if you will, with LeBanc and Sorensen lately on the third line. So, again, there's been some adversity in this Sharks season, and I think that has to go into account. You look at, again, 101 points. How could you not be happy with that? I understand. Throw a few more wins down the end that they could have had, and maybe they're at 108 or 110 points. I get it. But you can't be too disappointed with second in the division and the second best record in the Western Conference. I know we're all trying to figure out how it translates, but that's how I see the regular season is, adversity filled, definitely without some hurdles, but hurdles, not hurdles. Anyway, let me check the comments and just see what's being said. Jacob, what's up, man? Alicia, I'm really hoping they sign Joe Pavelski. We can talk about that. And I do want to go through the stats here of just the season that was. We're going to go through the list and everybody and their stats and just kind of quick evaluations. 408 JR saying Jones looked aggressive last night. I agree. Jones looked great last night. Some other comments here. Carlson looked good from Sean. And I would have to agree. You got to consider in for Carlson coming back last night. Hadn't played in, 17 games? Really hadn't played in, a lot more than a month's time. So not to mention, timing, legs, and lungs. Those are the three things I was watching last night. The timing will probably be the hardest thing to get back because everything else, the legs and lungs, as soon as he can get more real hard practices in and get the cardio back, nothing can replicate an NHL game. But the fact that, he's been rehabbing is at least good so that he can kind of get in that good cardio shape. And I forgot the minutes he played last night, but the first two periods, Pete DeBoer was not necessarily scaling him back. So good to see that he was tested, and hopefully today the recovery for number 65, hopefully there's no after effects of playing last night as he recovers from the groin injury. So again, just looking at the regular season, you have to say pretty satisfactory despite how it ended. Again, take these struggles, put them in a different month, put them in the month of November or December. We would have well forgotten about it by now had they ended up at this exact same mark, points-wise. I also want to point out, too, again, this is not a playoff preview, but if the format was the old structuring, instead of San Jose and Las Vegas in round one, I saw on Twitter that it would be San Jose and Dallas round one. I know what you're thinking. The Stars are a much different opponent than the Golden Knights, and that is true. But the NHL changed its playoff structure a few years back. Now that I see it this way, the good part is that you do get geographical rivalries from the start. The bad thing is when two of those geographical teams, like Las Vegas and San Jose, are equally talented, one of them is making a quick exit from the postseason after round one. So that's unfortunate to me. And the fact that you could never have a San Jose, Las Vegas Western Conference final because of the way the bracketing goes with geography. So I like the old way better. 1 through 8 in the Western Conference. 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, and so on and so on. But this is what we're dealing with now with this relatively new format. Topic number 2 here, in looking back at the regular season, was this the best 12 months of a calendar year for GM Doug Wilson? Got Erik Karlsson on September 13th. Got Gus Nyquist right before the trade deadline. Didn't have to give up a whole lot. Not to mention the past summer, right? Some big re-signings. Evander Kane, obviously, part of that. He's got all the big pieces locked down with, I know, the exception of Joe Pavelski. And we'll get to Joe. We'll get to the captain and his season and evaluating individually. I thought what was a tremendous statement, not only in a contract year, but coming off a rough season last year where he dealt with the hand injury as well as changing positions, going from winger to a centerman midway and not having Joe Thornton on his line. But yeah, the point to make here about Doug Wilson, I really feel like he's had other good acquisitions and gotten a lot out of some teams that maybe you didn't expect, and he's put all the right pieces in place. You think about fans being frustrated in the second half of March with results. How about the sentiments of Doug Wilson? Here he goes putting together on paper something very impressive, and they do perform. Really, it took him a while. It was a slow start and kind of a slow finish to the regular season, but you saw in the middle portions what they were completely capable of. So you got to imagine that he was just as frustrated seeing the results not come through like he had put together on paper. But I really feel like looking back, from a GM standpoint, if you want to evaluate him like a player and, having ups and downs, right? Like it's a business, it's a job, it's a performance-related industry. And you got to say, what he fielded in terms of the Sharks roster this season and the moves he made and the timeliness of the moves, and they didn't even have to do a deadline deal to get Gus Nyquist, but it was out there last minute. They got it done. And so I think you really do have to look at him and give him some extra credit. Vanya, hope I'm saying this right. Vanya Carrillo, Nyquist, Feels like the player Bodker was supposed to be. I mean, not to make direct comparisons. I'm not sure if that's completely fair on my part, but I think, Nyquist, responsible, has the finishing touch. Not all the time is he going to be on the score sheet, but like last night he was. And you can definitely see signs of that. Obviously comes from a very well-bred organization in the Detroit Red Wings. So, he plays the game the right way. How about this one? Hello from a Russian Sharks fan. Appreciate you watching, especially if you're on a different continent right now. All right. I'll get, by the way, to more of your questions and comments in just a little bit. Hopefully going to spend another 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so here on the YouTube channel with this look back at the season. All right. So how about Joe Thornton's season individually here? And I know when we get to the playoff preview portion of this next time around, the motivation for Jumbo has to be tremendous because last year he was dealing with the right knee. 2 playoffs ago, he was dealing with the left knee. Last year, you may recall, he never got in the postseason. He said he was a couple weeks away. If the team had lasted longer, he would have tried to come back. But again, that would have felt rushed. 2 playoffs ago, he tried to play through the torn ACL and MCL. So this is really set to be the first postseason for Joe with healthy knees since the Stanley Cup final run. And, I mean, you look at all the milestones he accomplished this season, 51 points in 73 games at 39 years of age and just totally taken over the role, third-line center. If you're telling me a Hall of Famer is your third-line center, it just goes to show you how deep this team is, and you're obviously well aware of that. But also, I think to develop chemistry with Marcus Sorensen, the third winger, or the second winger and the third forward on that line, it's changed around a little bit over the course of this season. Now it's Kevin Labanc, and I think that's a good choice for Joe. Why not put a pure scorer there with the ultimate assister? And I don't know if anybody's ever said that before, the ultimate assister. Sounds like a sister, but it's a sister. Anyway, I really feel like it was, you want to talk about most inspirational. Joe was exactly that this season. How many other players just hang up the skates? One knee blow-up is difficult enough. And I guess in a way, and Joe has said this before too, the second time around was actually easier in knowing what to expect and knowing some of the setbacks that he encountered and knowing how to get the knee right all over again. But it's crazy that an individual nearing 40 would put themselves through that twice, as he did. Not just that. And he's not just on the team in presence. I mean, he was an integral part of this club offensively, and there was a stat, I don't have it in front of me. The record for San Jose is dramatically different in games where he has at least 1 point. It was almost like wins and losses were like 3 or 4 to 1. So they're a dramatically better and different team when Joe is able to contribute somehow in the scoring, whether it's goals or assisting. And by the way, we've been having fun with the whole shooters shoot thing on Joe. I think you saw this regular season him shooting as much, especially as he got more confident lately, as we've ever seen number 19 shoot the puck. So that's been a good sign. What's been a frustrating sign is Erik Karlsson, who I think ended up playing, 56 games this regular season? Just an unfortunate injury timeline for number 65. And, it happens, I should say it's unfortunate that it happened for a couple different reasons. Number one, for him personally, he's in a contract season. Number two, because in a lot of senses, he was still trying to make an impact with this team. He already made the first great impression of deciding to come and having a really good month of December and January. Yeah, the adjustment was real, no doubt. But he'd already kind of proven himself of what he was capable of, and he wanted to continue that, right? I think he might have felt like the impression period wasn't over. But we get to January 15th in that game against Pittsburgh, and there were some whispers that he got hurt. Who knew what was up? But he plays the next night down in Arizona. But in that game, it was clear that Karlsson wasn't right. He was a -4 in that game. His minutes were way down. It was an ugly game, ugly loss, just ugly stat sheet for Karlsson. One where you kind of go, okay, something's not right here. And in fact, that was the case. because that was the last time we saw him until the All-Star break. Now, you may recall it was kind of a crazy situation. You rarely have a player miss all these games, but then be in the All-Star on the All-Star team and participate. He wasn't in the skills competition, which now, by the way, at that point, if you remember, we did not know publicly that it was the groin. So there were questions. Was it a finger, a toe? Was it something he could do in the All-Star game that he couldn't do in actual game action? But yeah, he participated. Hopefully there was no deeper parts of his injury suffered in the All-Star weekend. But then he missed some more games out of the All-Star festivities. Then he returns February 16th against Vancouver. He plays, I want to say, the next 4 games, if I recall correctly, then misses another game, right? So he's all of a sudden, he's back in, then he's out, and then he's back in against the Boston Bruins on February 26th. And before last night, that was the last time we had seen Karlsson. You kind of remember where he just spun and fell, and it wasn't pretty. In fact, he left that game, went to the dressing room, came back out on the ice at TD Garden, and Brad Marchand just got right past him, and you could tell right then and there that Karlsson was not right. So misses the next 17 games, comes back last night, and from all indications, I think there would have been something noticeable had he not been himself, and I didn't see anything. Curtis didn't see anything. Our game announcers didn't see anything. You tell me if you guys saw anything that looked abnormal, so I think that is a tremendous sign he was able to get through it. Now let's hope he's able to stay in the lineup for San Jose with the groin injury. One more point to make about this regular season, and I guess actually this is a bit looking forward too. They earn home ice advantage with the second spot in the Western Conference and in the Pacific Division. They get home ice against Las Vegas here. I actually think going into this series, and everybody talks about, well, if there's a Game 7, and there could be between these two teams because we know they play a lot of close games, you have home ice advantage. I actually think going into the playoffs that home ice is a bigger factor at the start of this series for the Sharks than it is at the end. Think about the way that they've ended their regular season here, and they're just feeling like they might be getting back on a roll again. Wouldn't you like that to continue on home ice rather than, let's say, Wednesday having to go down and play at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas? Of course, you'd rather have this game in your own barn, and you'd rather try and keep the momentum rolling. So I think home ice has actually worked out better for the Sharks at the beginning of this series rather than the end. Last thing I want to mention before I get into looking player by player is the fact that all the games expected to be on NBC Sports California. There may be some national coverage as well too, but we just want you to know that every Sharks game in round 1 you can see on NBC Sports California as of right now, including pre- and post-game coverage. I've been told that our pregame shows might be even a bit longer. So that schedule to still be released, I'll check my email in just a second to see if we have released something by now, but expect it in the very near future, all the details on that. All right, let's go player by player here real fast. And this is not for me to evaluate everybody, but kind of to summarize the seasons individually for the Sharks. Brent Burns, 83 points in 82 games. Curtis and I were saying last night when he got that goal and hit 82, that was the milestone for Burnsy. More so than even reaching the 60 assist mark, which, by the way, he finished with 67 apples. He was more than a point per game player this season, a plus 13 rating. Only 16 goals. Now, when I say that, we know how capable he is of being a goal scorer, but his contribution this year was the helpers to the tune of 67 in 82 games, and no question, he fuels the Sharks offense from that point position. So, he, to me, absolutely in the Norris conversation. I'd be completely shocked if he were not one of the final 3, and clearly I think what they're looking at is going to be him and Giordano. Let me just say, what I'm looking at is him and Giordano for that top honor of winning a Norris. And clearly, I'm a homer, so you know who I'm going with. But great season for the 33-year-old Brent Burns, leading the way in points. Second in points on the Sharks with 74, Tomas Hertl. And let's just recall this too, he missed 5 games. So Hurdle was that close, 3 points away from being a point-per-game player this season. His scoring was a bit more diverse, 35 goals. So that's also an impressive number, not to be missed. And 39 assists. He was a +5 player this season, averaging about 19 minutes on ice per night. So really good step-up season. If you ask me, most improved, probably Timo Meier and Tomas Hertl also close in that conversation. Both those guys got to be 1 and 2 right there. Logan Couture, third on the team in points at 70. He played 81 of the 82 games. 27 goals, 43 assists. Ends up having a -6 rating. I think, if you were to ask Logan, what do you think about your regular season? He's a guy that is hard on himself, and I admire that. I think a lot of fans do too. He'd probably tell you, he wanted more. Probably wanted to get to that 30-goal mark just for personal reasons. But again, not disappointed with it at all. He'd probably say he'd wanted a little bit more, and that's just him, and that's fine. But I'd have to say pretty satisfactory season for number 39. Timo Meier, 66 points in 78 games at just 22 years of age. He hit the 30-goal mark the other night, which we were proud of. That's a nice milestone for him to get to, 36 assists. Had 10 hits in a recent game, so he adds the physical element. I mean, this was a blossoming season for number 28, and I think such a reassuring thing for Sharks fans who are, interested in the future of the franchise. And to know that he is around for the long term, such a good sign for him to get, 23 goals last year and to really break out this year and hit that 30 mark. I thought was exceptional. I thought it was tremendous. Huge Timo Meier fan here. So, and I really do think the more times you see him in the playoffs, the more his game is really going to stand out, because he, to me, is a playoff type hockey player. All right, you wanted Joe Pavelski, you get Joe Pavelski. 75 games played, 64 points, 38 goals. I had a Kane and Meier sandwich there with Pavelski in the middle, and I'm going to zoom in so I can see this bigger. 38 goals. Let's say it again, because Joe Pavelski flirting with 40 this year. And you know what? You got to say that even as of late, some of that production with his absence has tailed off. There was definitely a hot streak where Pavelski was racking them up like they were going out of style. But Pavelski, to me, the timing of his goals was also important, because when this team was struggling, when they weren't getting a lot of that offense, as much, I should say, in late November and even into early December, it was Pavelski who was the constant of this group. So he carried them through a lot of difficult times this year. Again, almost getting to 40 on a contract season. There's a lot for this team to sort out with Erik Karlsson. What maneuver happens there? Will he test the market? To a certain extent, I believe so. And I also think that Joe Pavelski, he's taken a hometown discount before. I think everybody... Can everybody command more? Could Joe Pavelski command a higher dollar amount elsewhere? Potentially. If Karlsson re-signs, will he have to re-sign for a little bit less than he could potentially get somewhere else? And I'm not talking a big difference, but just a little bit, maybe. That's just kind of been the nature of all the good players in San Jose, and that's kind of been the magic of Doug Wilson, is that he gets these guys for just a little bit less because they're all buying into the team that they're part of. And the salary cap situation. But again, Pavelski coming off last year, the injury, the transition, everybody looking at his down numbers and thinking, well, this might be the beginning of a decline. Did you see what he did this season? So I'm very happy for Joe Pavelski. Evander Kane, we should also mention, late what Evander went through, the injury in the Boston game, then, days later, losing a child in pregnancy with his wife. Just, I feel like that's a process, a grieving process that he's probably still going through right now, him and his family. And maybe hockey, in a sense, is one of the greatest things of normalcy, to distract from the tragedy of life that he's recently been through. But just looking back at Kane's season overall, 75 games played, 56 points. He also hits the 30-goal mark. And I bet you if you ask Evander, he's not shy to tell you that's probably a baseline number where if you say, give me some expectations at the beginning in training camp, he'd probably he probably put himself in for 30 goals, and he got there. Again, he is a playoff-type player. Just like Timo Meier brings the physicality to wear out the opponent over the course of a 7-game series. And the other thing about Evander Kane, he's only playing in his second postseason ever, right? Last time around was his first time ever in the second season. So you imagine the hunger that he's got right now, tremendously high. I'll speed through some of the rest here. Kevin Labanc, 56 points. He played all 82 games, 17 goals, a lot of power play time. I really do feel like his game trended up as the season went on. He said it several times that Pete DeBoer and the coaching staff asked more from him from a defensive standpoint. Seems like he gave him that. Not only that, he also benefited maybe more from the offensive side once the commitment to defense, so the attention to defense went up. Joe Thornton at 51 points in 73 games, 35 assists. You know what? If you look at the splits for Joe, just from the beginning of the season till the end, you know what? Actually, forget stats for just a second. If you just watched the games, you could see 19 looking, like I said before, a lot more like the Hall of Famer that we know. Even at age 39, it seemed like he got a lot more comfortable at the end of this season. And I'm telling you, that is when you want Joe to be feeling his best here as we go further on. Just even dangerous behind the cage, like Jumbo of old, that retro Joe where he's got, Sorensen out front, and the goalie's trying to look over his shoulder, and just brilliant passing as of late. I don't have time for all the milestones he accomplished this season. Congratulations to Jumbo on just a really impressive and inspiring regular season. Erik Karlsson, 45 points in 53 games. The offensive production here is just amazing. 3 goals, just 3 goals from an offensively talented defenseman, but 42 assists. So he missed all those games, and he is still one of the leaders in assists for this team for the 28-year-old Erik Karlsson. Ended up also a +6 rating. I don't know what the future holds, but that's not what this video is all about in terms of him re-signing. Like I said before, I think he owes it to himself to look around. How far he goes looking, who knows? We'll find out. But as for did he enjoy his time here in San Jose? Seemed like it. Did he bond with teammates? Seemed like it. Does he feel like a good fit for Northern California in the future? Like, is this the type of hockey market for him? Well, it's definitely a different one. It's not like Ottawa in any sense of climate or maybe, I don't want to say pressure to perform. The pressure is definitely there in San Jose, but just the constant spotlight in Ottawa, you don't have that out here. So I wonder if that made his life a little bit easier this season, or maybe he appreciated that more having it for the very first time. So I don't know. I don't want to get into all that in the future. As for this regular season, the only sense, well, no, I shouldn't say it was probably a disappointing start for Karlsson. Definitely was, first 20-something games. But when he found himself, and he had, a 14-game point streak, I want to say, you could really see what Karlsson was capable of. Jonas Donskoi, 37 points in 80 games, had been a healthy scratch here as of late. I think Donskoi is a player who set the bar exceptionally high for himself in the last couple seasons, maybe didn't reach that potential this year, but that's the beautiful part about it. You're just kind of waiting for it to come back, and you're seeing that he's got all the right pieces to do it. No, he had the shoulder injury in not recent times, but in his recent history. Hopefully that's not part of the equation of his season. But, again, Donskoi is a player. He could be an X factor in a series moving forward. Marcus Sorensen, love the guy. 30 points in 80 games played, was 3 goals shy of the 20 mark. I wish number 20 would have gotten to that milestone, but didn't. Great having him on Joe Thornton's line. Undersized, but plays like he's 4 or 5 inches taller. One of my personal favorites from that regard is Marcus Sorensen this season. Sorensen ended his year, by the way, a +10, just like Donskoi did. Marc-Edouard Vlasic, I know a lot of people watched him this year and saw him struggle defensively, which was completely uncharacteristic for a guy that had always been of a Norris caliber defensive defenseman. Ends his season a -6 with 3 goals and 22 assists, again in 72 games. Missed 10 obviously this year, but at some point, when the Sharks struggled March into April, those couple weeks, Vlasic was actually their leading point getter. And I also think you could time it out too and see that his resurgence had taken place. And for the struggles that he had, I think he was a minus 13 at one point, cut that in half. So good to see Vlasic finish strong on what was, for whatever reason, just a different and difficult season. Flip side of that is Brendan Dillon. Excuse me 1 second. Brendan Dillon ends his season a plus 19. He was the plus-minus leader for the Sharks this regular season. That is a high compliment to a player that, I don't know, maybe you did or didn't expect that from him going into the campaign. Just a really solid effort. Yeah, only 1 goal and 21 assists, but again, played all 82 games and was on the ice for 19 more goals scored than against. I think you have to look at that as a tremendous positive for Brendan Dillon. Melker Karlsson, 79 games played, 16 points, 12 goals, only 4 assists. Again, I would throw Melker in a similar category as Jonas Donskoy, a player who has set the bar exceptionally high in recent seasons, maybe didn't get to it this time around. And because of that, all optimism is there that these guys could be X factors in a playoff series coming soon. I'll try and roll through the next ones fast here because I didn't want to make the video this long, but Barclay Goodrow, 16 points, played all 82 games. Obviously, I want to look at his PK stats here, which, of course, I don't necessarily have at hand, but a critical component there. Justin Braun at a minus 14. Also, not a benchmark season for Bronner, but I've always maintained that as the Sharks get praised over the years, when you looked at the most important names, Justin Braun was a foundational player, a staple player, didn't get that recognition. So I don't want to take anything away from him with maybe a down season statistically. And again, I'll close on this main point that I wanted to make actually at the start, but forgot to. The Sharks defense is going to take them as far as they can go in the postseason, but that was also a huge story of this regular season. Tim Heed, 37 games, 13 points. I put him in the same category, and I could kind of put, I guess I could put Joakim Ryan and Radil. I'm going to have to speed things up here and get through some of these other players, but there's a lot of next generation Sharks, which I think it's hard to start evaluating them until they get heavy minutes and heavy game totals under their belts. And again, for Heed to play 37 games, in, out, it's hard to gain consistency in the league. It's hard to really see what a player is made of. Radim Šimek, let me touch on him real fast. 9 points in his 41 games, but it really felt like the debut, the first 5, 6, 7 games he played before he took that hit from Sam Bennett in Calgary. This guy was physical. He was an impactful player. I did notice that he didn't seem to have that same element after the hit from Bennett, and we know he suffered a concussion. It was unfortunate. Right now he's on the shelf with the ACL and MCL injury to the right knee. Just Sharks miss him. And the Sharks went on their losing run of March as soon as Šimek came out of the lineup. And so a lot of people want to correlate it to that. Pete DeBoer said you could. It's probably not the main reason. But clearly the bottom line is that he's an important piece for the future. Let's hope that knee recovery and rehabilitation goes quite well. Gus Nyquist, in his 19 games with the Sharks, 11 points. I thought that was a great deadline addition, two-way player, smart player, fit right in. So that's the kind of depth that the Sharks are going to hopefully lean on in the playoffs, guys like Nyquist. All right, you know what? Let's just get right to goalies. And we've all had this conversation before. I understand the save percentage and the goals against for Jones and Dell are not complementary. Jones ends the season with a .294 goals against and an .896 save percentage. Dell ends the season with a .317 goals against and an .886 save percentage. It's the old chicken and egg thing. Was it team defense? Was it rough goaltending this season? I will say this. The Sharks were 32-0 when they allowed 2 or fewer goals to the opponent. We all know that stat. I've said it a bunch. On purpose. Defense is the key to winning games for the Sharks. They're pretty much consistently going to score goals. And I think we talked about this last night. The amount of 30 goal scorers on this team. They had 4 different guys get to that milestone. Of course, the iPad wouldn't work here when I want it to, but how about in terms of double-digit goal scorers? Burns, Hurdle, Couture, Meyer, Pavelski, Kane, LeBanc, Thornton, Donskoy, Sorensen, Carlson. Wait, Melker Carlson, to be clear. So, I mean, the scoring has been a diverse effort. It's always been there, but this team wins when they play exceptional defense. And so I just think that was a theme of this regular season when they went on some of their longest win streaks. At one point, they won they won 7 games, but 6 of those 7 games, they allowed 2 or fewer during that stretch. The beginning of months is when they had their best times, and the beginning of months, for whatever reason, is when they played their best defense. Hopefully, we're still kind of in the beginning of April here to start the playoffs. So that's all I have. Let me look back, and I am sorry. I should have checked the comments section long ago. I'm sure I missed out on a bunch of good stuff here. Jessica checking in a bit ago. Ninja Hurdle Memes. Hello. Appreciate you watching here. Alicia, yes, I did answer that. Do we know if they're going to show the Sharks playoff games on NBC Sports? NBC Sports Network. Yes, the games are obviously all covered nationally as well. But if you're here in Northern California, NBC Sports California is where you can watch the games. Hurdle's a beast. I agree with that. Alicia, Logan's your favorite player. I can relate. LoganCoutureFanClub.com. And let me see if there's anything else. Could you imagine if Randy Hahn was calling the last second for San Jose to win the Stanley Cup? Yes, I could imagine that. And knowing Hunter, I would imagine there would be some tears associated just because he has been there since day one. He was part of the grassroots efforts to even bring NHL hockey to San Jose. All right. Hey, that does it for this look back at the regular season of 2018 and 2019. In the next couple of days, I'll do another one of these, just strictly looking ahead towards round 1. But I wanted to just summarize the regular season we just witnessed. Felt like that was important to do before we totally moved on. As for just feelings about the regular season, I know expectations got set super high, but the Sharks ran into some road bumps. I think they did the best they could with them. Maybe a little bit of fatigue set in here at the end, but they're going to have the ability to recover. And let's not forget, this wasn't a Las Vegas season review, but they also had kind of a rough ending to their season. Marc-Andre Fleury was out with the injury for a bit. They lost a handful of games, so they would also be an interesting study as well. All right, guys, I appreciate it. That does it for the video. Thank you so much for watching, and all the typical stuff I should tell you. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Twitter, Instagram, I'm all over those. The podcast, it's on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. I'm here in the studio, by the way, watching the A's. That's what I've been doing as I've been making this video. Trailing 5-4. We're only in the second inning still of a baseball game that's been going on more than an hour now. Crazy game so far. So if you're not busy here on a Sunday, check us out later for post-game live from this very studio. All right? See you guys later.